Hey y'all, I hope y'all are having a great day. It's beautiful spring weather, sunny, a little cooler than it has been here, and it really is just gorgeous. I'm enjoying it. And I always record, or I usually record the podcast on Sunday afternoons, Sunday evenings, and it gets loaded up to my podcast hoster, which is Spreaker, that evening, and it's officially, published, released, I guess you would say, on Monday morning. But some of you are, I guess, extra eager and start listening to it on a Sunday evening. And I just want to wish all of you a very happy Mother's Day. And I hope everyone had a very happy Mother's Day. It's a very, very special day. Very special day. Anyway, let's see. Let me go ahead and give you the new contact information. We changed everything recently. Best way to contact me is judson@judsoncarroll.com. All my website, my blog, links to all my books and everything are in the show notes. So if you ever need to get in touch with me, please feel free so to do. Always glad to answer questions or chat about herbs or foraging or whatever you need to know. So let's go ahead and get into today's show. And we got a couple of interesting herbs and edible plants this week. In fact, our edible plant is also a medicinal herb. So we'll start there. And it is a great one. It's another one of those that was brought here by Europeans for food and to be chicken feed. It's chickweed, in fact. Chickweed is a wonderful little plant. Depending on conditions, it can grow year-round, even in the mountains. With it's one of the earliest spring plants, but with a little cover, you can grow it through the winter as long as the ground doesn't freeze hard. So if you can put like a little cold frame over it or something, a low tunnel works really well. And reason it's called chickweed is because birds love it. Well, it's also very nutritious and good for people too. It's a small, tender plant. It would take a ton of it to actually make a meal for humans, but it's really good to have the vitamins from it in the wintertime. Very worth growing in the garden and looking for in the wild. It's very nutritious. It has been traditionally used to help prevent scurvy. Our ancestors in the wintertime just didn't have access to a lot of vegetables that had vitamin C in them, and lack of vitamin C is what caused scurvy. Now, of course, you can make sauerkraut, and your cabbage would have vitamin C, but and they just load tons of barrels of sauerkraut into the ships that were crossing the ocean back then to try to prevent scurvy. They didn't really know, that vitamin C was the reason, the lack of vitamin C was the culprit, but they knew that if they were eating fresh vegetables, they didn't get scurvy. And of course, later when the Europeans discovered citrus, the reason the British are called limeys is because they started carrying all kinds of limes and such aboard the ships, again, to prevent scurvy. But this would be one that would kind of fill that hungry gap that area, the period of early spring when you have planted your garden but nothing's coming in yet, right? This is one of those plants that our ancestors would have looked for uh, the stored food for the winter is gone and your garden's not coming in yet. So there are several plants like this that really were important for keeping people alive. And most of our popular wild spring edibles were used that way by our ancestors. And chickweed is actually so hardy. There's several varieties of it. I think Stellaria is the most common, but it grows everywhere from hot, dry places in Greece to the Alps of Europe. I mean, it really is very adaptable, and you should be able to grow it pretty much anywhere, really. Um, Fresh, tender chickweed is a perfect addition to salad, without a doubt. Very nice in soup. It really does cook down dramatically, though. So a big bowl full of chickweed is going to make a very small serving on a plate. It's very mild in flavor. It's not bitter or peppery at all. So if you like milder pot herbs, use this one to mellow out stronger pot herbs like mustard. Mustard's peppery and bitter and everything. So many of the wild edibles are. You can put a big handful of chickweed in there and it's going to mellow things out a little bit. Plus, you're going to get a lot of good nutrition from it. As I said, it's pretty much a weed, so-called, grows wild everywhere because not only has it been spread by humans, it's been spread by birds. But it's really easy to grow in the garden, and this is one that I think you should grow in the garden, especially so you learn to identify it in the wild. Because if you get used to growing this plant and seeing this plant, you're going to start spotting it everywhere, and you're going to realize you may have an abundance of chickweed. Which is a very good thing. A little chickweed and some henbit at the very least would keep your teeth from falling out from scurvy. So good to know. But anyway, I like to combine chickweed with fresh sweet corn cut off the cob. That's really good. Those flavors go excellently together. Some fresh green peppers, either hot or sweet. When I'm looking at pepper and I want one that could be either hot or sweet or a little of both, I go with the poblano. I love a bell pepper. I love banana peppers. I love cubanelles. Your more mild kind of peppers. Sweet cherry peppers, absolutely one of my favorites for pickling or just snacking on. But I like a little heat to a pepper. I like a little more flavor. So yeah, I really do prefer poblanos to bell peppers, with the exception maybe of like a really sweet red bell pepper. Sometimes you just have to have that sweetness from that red bell pepper, and that's really when those baby bells come in just perfectly because they're really sweet. I mean, you can just snack on them. I mean, any kid would love those. And of course, I love the hot cherry peppers pickled. Oh man, I don't need to get started about peppers. I can be on peppers all day. So combining with this mix of chickweed and sweet corn and peppers. I'm going to include some cheese and milk because those or cream. Those flavors just really work well together. Mild, sweet, really nice. And of course, chickweed is going to start coming in a lot earlier than corn and peppers. So it's a great way to use the frozen or canned corn. If you home can, I usually blanch and freeze corn and freeze a lot of peppers. They get mushy, but they're just a great way to use them. And especially peppers you're going to usually roast anyway, like poblanos. It's okay if they're a little soft, You just blanch them, pop them in the freezer. Usually cut the seeds out. I'll cut them into halves at least, or fourths more often. And really easy to use in soups and stews and such as that. But you can also use dried peppers. You just rehydrate them in hot water. You can dry your own. I smoke and dry my jalapeno peppers whenever I do barbecue, but a lot of peppers could just be hung to dry, or you can buy dried peppers from the store. Either way, it's going to work really well. I love like anchos and pasillos and such with corn and, a little cream and cheese. That's a phenomenally good combination, and the chickweed is just going to tie that all together like you wouldn't believe. So any combination along those lines. And, some broth or stock, and I can put that together and make a chowder with the addition of salt and pepper and cilantro. Same combo minus the broth and milk. Kind can be combined with some masa and lard wrapped in corn husk and steamed. Makes some excellent tamales with a little hot sauce. Yes, it's a vegetarian tamale. Um, really good, really good. Like I said, chopped peppers, corn, chickweed, maybe a little bit of crumbled, like, what is it, cojito cheese or um, whatever that queso fresca, and wrap it in some masa mixed with lard, steam them in corn husk. Phenomenally good with some hot sauce. I mean, yeah, I love that. And I'm not big at all on vegetarian or vegan dishes. And of course, I would definitely have cheese in mine. So wouldn't be vegan, but I'm not big on vegetarian dishes. I can eat my weight in fresh corn tortillas. And what I mean is, I'm not talking the corn meal. I mean corn cut off the cob. It can be blanched frozen corn, or it can be corn straight out of the field. Definitely the mix with some onion and some poblano pepper, usually serrano, any kind of pepper, and some cheese. Those are phenomenally good, really. And chickweed and spring onions, along with some cheese, makes an excellent omelet. It's good fresh eggs. I mean, chicken eggs and chickweed go perfectly together. If you like something green in your omelet, like a little spinach or something, try chickweed. It's going to really impress you. Definitely some onion. You got to have some onion with your cheese and eggs, in my opinion. Flavors fresh. The chickweed's sweeter than spinach, so I really would be hard pressed to think of any savory recipe. I mean, I wouldn't put it in a dessert, but I think you can pretty much put chickweed in anywhere. And as for the medicinal properties, Plants for a Future says chickweed has a very long history of herbal use, being particularly beneficial in the external treatment of any kind of itching of the skin. In other words, used as a poultice. It has been known to soothe severe itchiness even when all other remedies have failed. In excess doses, chickweed could cause diarrhea, so I mean, you'd have to eat a ton of chickweed. Should not be used in medicinal doses by pregnant women, as we always say. Be very careful of herbs if you're pregnant. The whole plant, but as for a little bit of food, I mean, yeah, sure, check with your doctor. But I mean, when they're talking medicinal doses, they're really usually talking about making a tincture out of it, a really strong extract, a really strong tea of the plant. You definitely, if you're pregnant, don't want to have a medicinal dose of oregano that can cause a miscarriage. But a little oregano in your pasta sauce, it's totally different. So anyway, the whole plant is astringent, carminative. That means it helps settle the stomach, essentially. Demulcent means softening. Diuretic means it helps remove excess fluid. Expectorant means it helps get mucus out of the lungs. Laxative, you know what that means. Refrigerant means cooling, and that's used as a poultice on inflamed skin. Vulnerary means wound healing. So taken internally, it is useful in the treatment of chest complaints, and in small amounts, it also aids digestion. It can be applied as a poultice and will relieve any kind of rosacea, essentially, reddening of the skin, and is effective wherever there are fragile superficial veins. So, like rosacea, again. In an infusion of the fresh or dried herb can be added to bath water for its emollient or softening property and will help reduce inflammation in rheumatic joints, for example, and encourage tissue repair. It's wound healing. It's a good herb for the skin, really. Chickweed is best harvested between May and July and can be used fresh or be dried and stored for later use. A decoction of the whole plant is taken internally as a postpartum depurative, a minagogue, galactagogue, and circulatory tonic. A minagogue means brings on menses. Galactagogue means increases mother's milk. It is believed to relieve constipation and be beneficial in the treatment of kidney complaints. A decoction is also used externally to treat rheumatic pains, wounds, and ulcers, and the expressed juice of the plant has been used as an eye wash. So, yet again, we find one of these so-called common weeds, which is not only a really good wild plant for food. This one is also often raised for actually just feeding chickens, but very, very medicinal. And like I said, get some stellaria. That's the most common. That's like the official. Let me see if I can get the Latin name for that real quick. Stellaria media, Media, and start growing that in your garden. And no problem. You're going to start spotting chickweed everywhere. I guess the only plant I know that really looks a whole lot like it is a plant called Mexican mint. Um, really does look a lot like it. You're going to want, the leaves are different though. The leaves are totally different, and you're going to want to, if it grows in your area, which it grows in the sandhills of North Carolina. That's about the only place I've seen it in North Carolina. I haven't seen it. I never saw it in Georgia. I never saw it in Virginia or Tennessee, or it's not that common. It's just a different plant. It's not poisonous or anything. Not dangerous to the best of my knowledge. But just you're going to want to make sure you can tell the difference between those two plants. And if you look at the leaf, no problem. You're not going to really confuse those two at all. But if you get some stellaria and you start growing in your garden, within a month it's going to sprout, and you can start harvesting it, and you're going to get to know this plant very quickly. And like I said, you're going to start spotting it everywhere, and it's incredibly useful. So now moving on to the medicinal plant proper for this week. This comes from, well, first, of course, the chickweed was in my book, Spring Foraging Cookbook. This comes from my book, The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast. Latin name on this one we'll start with, it's Medicago lupulina. Now, it's considered a clover, though it's not the same kind of clover as like red clover or white clover, all that. But it's generally called a clover, and it's black clover. Black medic is a really old name for this plant, black medic. Hop clover, trefoil, yellow trefoil. Medicago, and also related is Medicago polymorpha, which is burr clover, burr medic, or California burr clover. These are weeds that have been naturalized just about everywhere. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. We'll move on to another plant quickly because there's not a lot of use for this plant, but it's not useless either. Plants for Future, for instance, says that black medic, that's the one that's also called black clover and yellow trefoil and all that. Aqueous extracts or liquid extracts of the plant have an antibacterial property against microorganisms. That's important. It is also somewhat edible. The leaves and young shoots, raw or cooked as a pot herb, may be eaten. Only the very young leaves can be eaten raw. The plant is actually pretty high in vitamins, and it contains about 6% protein, believe it or not. Rich in vitamin A, C, and E, either raw or cooked. And the seed can be parched and ground into a powder and mixed with water to make a mush. You could also put it in, with a flour to make a bread. Very nutritious, highly nutritious, and seems to have a tonic effect on the digestive system. Now, the other one I wanted to cover just very, very, very briefly is another plant called chickweed, but this one's actually not stellaria. It's Mollugo, okay, known as carpetweed or devil's grip, Indian chickweed, world chickweed. Not much use for that, okay. It has been used similarly to chickweed as a poultice for wound healing. So if you're looking at wild chickweeds, and in your area you've got this Mollugo, Mollugo, as opposed to stellaria, don't try to eat it. It's not going to make a very good food, but it does have similar wound healing properties. But now, we'll just cover a third plant, which is a lot more useful. You're going to get a lot more use out of this than either of the other two. And it's Morris alba, white mulberry. That's pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, interchangeable with red mulberry. The mulberries are mulberries. They're Morris, okay, and they grow all over the place. People brought them in to grow them as food. Birds spread the seeds. Not all of them bear fruit. Some are better tasting than others, but we're going to talk about the medicinal uses of the tree, and it has documentation going back at least to ancient Greece. Dioscorides said that the fruit makes the intestines soluble. He means it was a pretty good laxative. He said it is easily spoiled and bad for the stomach. So they're actually very sensitive plants, and they can the berries. I mean, they're not. It's why you never see them in the stores. They bruise easily and they start to rot. But he said, boiled in a brass jar and left in the sun, it is made more astringent. I guess kind of boiled down, get some of the water out of it. A little honey mixed in it makes it good for the discharge of fluids, for gangrenous ulcerations of the cheeks, and for inflamed tonsils. Nice astringent, good for mouth sores and tonsillitis and all that. The strength of it is increased if alum in a small amount is mixed. And he also recommended it being mixed with the galls of oak, which are incredibly astringent, etc., etc. And he said unripe mulberries pounded are mixed with sauces of ruis, that's sumac berries, and they help with intestinal complaints. Again, it's going to be that astringent property. The bark from the root, boiled in water, taken as a drink, loosens the bowels, so it has the opposite effect. Expels broadworms from the intestines, and is an antidote for those who have taken aconitum as a drink. Well, I'm not going to rely upon that. Don't take aconitum. Don't internally ever ingest wolfsbane, monkshood, aconite. Okay, it was a very common poison in ancient Greece and such, and people were often poisoned with it, and they did come up with a lot of remedies. But I would just say don't take aconite at all. The leaves pounded into small pieces and applied with oil heal burns. Boiled with rainwater and black fig leaves, they dye the hair. Well, that's very interesting. Rainwater is very soft, and I guess that would be preferable to a mineral-rich, well water in this hair dye that they came up with. A wine cupful, a wine glass-sized serving of the juice from the leaves helps those bitten by harvest spiders. A decoction of the bark and leaves is a good rinse for toothaches. Again, it's going to be astringent property. There seem to be some wild mulberries similar to the fruit of the bramble, but more astringent. So sort of like blackberries, but more astringent. And the juice is less easily spoiled and is used in warm packs, warm compress, for inflammations, healing ulcerated jaws, and to fill up wounds in the flesh. They grow in shady and cold places. Skipping ahead 1,500 years, we'll get to 1500s England, probably about 1,700 years actually. Gerard wrote of mulberry, and he wrote of mulberries in general. Mulberry being gathered before they be ripe are cold and dry almost to the 3rd degree, and do mightily bind. Again, that's the astringent property. Being dried, they are good for the lask and bloody flux. We're talking diarrhea and bloody diarrhea. The powder is used in meat and is drunk with wine and water. They stay the bleedings and also the reds. It's excessive menstrual bleeding. They are excessively good against inflammations or hot swellings of the mouth and jaw, and for other inflammations newly beginning. The ripe and newly gathered mulberries are likewise cold and be full of juice, which has the taste of wine. They're very, very good, and you can actually make a very good wine from mulberries. If you got a good mulberry tree, you got a real treat, because like I said, very hard to buy this fruit in stores. He said is somewhat drying without a binding quality, so you could eat. He thought you could eat as many ripe fruits as you want without being constipated, which makes sense because there's plenty of fiber in them. But he was also talking about the juice of it by itself, and therefore is also mixed with medicines for the mouth, and such as help hot swellings of the mouth and almonds of the throat. That means swollen glands. We're talking inflamed tonsils again, for which infirmities it is singularly good. The juice of the ripe berries made into a confection with sugar. He gives the name of it, and then says was also used as a syrup, was exceedingly good for ulcers and hot swellings of the tongue, throat, almonds, that's again swollen glands, uvula of the throat, and any other malady arising from those parts. Mulberries taken in meat, and also before meat, do very speedily pass through the belly by reason of their moisture and slipperiness, and make a passage for other meats. What does that mean? He recommended eating mulberries before and with a meal to aid digestion. We'll just put it that way. They are very good to quench the thirst, and they stir up an appetite to meat. They are not hurtful for the stomach, for they nourish the body very little, being taken before or after a meal. For although they be less hurtful than other fruits, they may be corrupted and putrefied. Okay. English weren't real big on eating raw fruits and vegetables. They liked a lot of cooked fruits and vegetables. So they seemed to think that even raw apples were bad for the stomach. We obviously don't believe that anymore. We know better than that. The English are real kind of weird about their food sometimes. But he's warning that they can rot quickly. So eat them fresh or don't eat them at all. Let's see. He said the bark of the root is bitter, hot and dry. Decoction thereof doth open the stoppings of the liver and the spleen. It purgeth the belly and driveth forth the worms. The same bark being steeped in vinegar helps the toothache. Of the same effect is also a decoction of the leaf and bark. Dioscorides covered that, and he mentions that Galen said that there is in the leaves and the first buds of this tree a middle faculty both to bind and scour. No idea what he means. We'll move on to Culpeper about 100 years later. A little bit easier to understand sometimes. He says the mulberry is of different parts. The ripe berries, by reason of their sweetness and slippery moisture, open the body. The unripe bind it. In other words, one would be a laxative and the other would help stop diarrhea. And it is especially true when they are dried. They are good to stay fluxes and lasks and the abundance of women's courses, so good for diarrhea and excessive bleeding. The bark of the root kills the broad worm in the body. The juice or syrup of the juice made from the berries helps all inflammations and sores of the mouth, the throat, the palate of the mouth, and the palate of the mouth when it's fallen down. If you've ever had like really bad sinus conditions and then like the roof of your mouth, or actually the palate just behind there gets swollen, and it can be hard to swallow, hard to breathe, the astringent property would shrink up that swelling. The juice of the leaves is a remedy against the biting of serpents and for those who have taken aconite. Okay, again, don't take aconite and try not to get bitten by any serpents. Not always as easy as it sounds. I can't tell you how many times I have been out hiking off the mountain. We don't have poisonous snakes on the mountain at my elevation. Just down a little bit, 1,000 feet down, there are tons of rattlesnakes, not where I live. But more often, I've nearly stepped on a copperhead. It happens many, many times. And down in the swamps, you got to look out for cottonmouths. They are nasty creatures. They are nasty. They're awful. They actually have a tail, though. They kind of hiss when you approach, and it smells like a freshly cut cucumber. Some people say watermelon, but I think it's more like cucumber. And so it's really important when you're down in the swamps or you're down around rivers and low areas to sniff, to smell, to be aware of not just sight and sound, but what you're smelling. And if you smell that smell, look around quickly, because they usually, if you're in the water, they will attack you. On land, they usually don't strike unless threatened. So you're about to step on one, you're about to sit on one, be really, really careful. They're nasty critters. Really, man, Cape Fear River, they've been known to swarm people in the water. Like a swarm of bees coming at you, except they're venomous snakes. Really scary. So, let's see. The leaves beaten with vinegar are good to lay upon any place that is burnt with fire. A decoction made of the bark and leaves is good to wash the mouth and teeth when they ache. If the root be a little cut and a small hole made in the ground next thereunto, in harvest time. Oh, okay, I see what he's saying. He's saying if you cut a small hole at the root, I guess in the fall, he's saying in the harvest time, it will give out a certain juice, which being hardened the next day is of good use to help the toothache. So apparently a sap, essentially from the root, was good for toothache, to dissolve knots, and to purge the belly. The leaves of mulberries are said to stay bleeding in the mouth of the nose, or the bleeding of piles, which is hemorrhoids, or of a wound being bound unto the place. The branch of the trees are taken when the moon is full and bound to the wrists of a woman's arm, whose courses come down too much and does stay them in a short space. I think we're going to call that more folklore. I don't think someone with excessive menstruation is going to be helped a whole lot by taking a tree branch in the full moon and tying it to her wrist. But hey, what do I know? I'm a guy. I don't know everything about this stuff. Now, much more modern times, with 1930s, and Miss Grieve tells us that the sole use of mulberry in her time in the 1930s England was for preparing a syrup. The mulberry juice obtained from the ripe fruit was an official drug in the British pharmacopoeia, and it was made into this syrup, essentially with sugar and such, and was chiefly used as a slightly laxative for its slightly laxative properties, also as an expectorant, that's to get mucus up out of the lungs, and though used as a gargle, it will relieve sore throat. And that was a mixture essentially of mulberry juice, sugar, and alcohol. So, be a very, very pleasant syrup to, I'd be tempted to sip on that, actually. That's going to be good. But she also included recipes for mulberry wine, which that's a great way to use mulberry, and it's a medicinal wine. You can keep it on hand all the time. And let's see, I'll just give you that real quick because I enjoy winemaking. She says pour 1 gallon of 1 gallon each of ripe mulberries. 1 gallon. No, let's try it one more time. On each gallon of ripe mulberries, pour 1 gallon of boiling water and let them stand for 2 days. Then squeeze all through a sieve or bag. Now, like I said, mulberries are a very soft fruit. They're very fragile. Just pouring boiling water on there and letting them steep is going to extract the water out of this. You don't really have to press mulberries. You could. There's no need to, though. Press them through a sieve or a bag. That's basically, the people used to use pillowcases. No problem. Wash out the tub or jar and then return the juice to it. Add sugar at the rate of 3 pounds to each gallon. It's going to be very sweet. Stir up until quite dissolved. Then put it into a cask and basically pitch your yeast and let it ferment. And you're going to have to put an airlock in there. I would use a glass carboy with a winemaker's fermentation airlock. She said it would be cleared and ready to bottle in 4 months' time. And she said if you put a small lump of sugar in each bottle, it would carbonate. So always be careful with that. You want to use bottles that are designed for carbonation or they can explode. But you can make a nice sparkling wine out of just about anything that way. But yeah, that's a super easy mulberry wine to make. I do like that she combines a gallon of mulberries to a gallon of water because there's no reason to use straight mulberry juice unless you had a ton of it. It's going to be a sweet wine the way she made it. You might want to cut back on the sugar a little bit, but of course the English like their sweet wine. So, but it's going to be very medicinal. You could use it just like that syrup. She said that mulberries were often used in Devonshire for mixing with cider, giving a pleasant taste and a deep red color. I can absolutely see that. She said in Greece they fermented the mulberry wine and I guess distilled it to make a very inebriating brandy, a nice high proof brandy. Apparently, Ivanhoe, and Scott relates in Ivanhoe that the Saxons made a favorite drink called morat from the juice of mulberries with honey. So she says she's not sure though because of the language, but yeah, you could absolutely make. She thinks they may have made more of a blackberry and honey wine, but you could do a mulberry and honey wine or mead that would be just fantastic. I may have to try that. And then she gives a great recipe for mulberry jam, which of course would also be medicinal. And you can have it on your toast with butter. And I love to eat my medicinal herbs. She says use very ripe mulberries, or the jam would have an acrid taste. Put 1 pound of mulberries in a jar. Let it stand over a pan of water on the fire until the juice is extracted. Strain them and put the juice into a pan with 3 pounds of sugar. Boil it. Remove the scum. Put in 3 pounds of very ripe mulberries and let them stand in the syrup until thoroughly warm. So she's basically juiced them and then put in more mulberries. and set the pan back on the fire and boil them gently for a short time, stirring all the time, taking care not to break the fruit. So you're going to have a nice chunky jam, and it's going to be wonderful. Take the pan off, let them stand in a syrup all night. Put the pan on the fire again in the morning and boil again until gently stiff. So she's letting the pectin develop, and that's it's going to make it really good. I've never had mulberry jam. I'm going to have to try that. I mean, I don't have a huge sweet tooth, but some butter and bread with some jam or honey, or a biscuit, homemade buttermilk biscuit with lard, made with lard. I mean, oh my gosh, yeah. I can definitely eat some buttered biscuits with jam. King's American Dispensatory of 1898 states, mulberries possess very slightly nutritive qualities. They are refrigerant and laxative, so that means cooling and laxative. Well, and refrigerant in this case, probably as opposed to being applied, they're actually saying the berries, so we're not applying like a poultice to a wound that would help, bring down inflammation, make it less hot, but refrigerant as in reducing the body temperature, helping with fevers and such. Their juice forms a pleasant and grateful drink for patients suffering from febrile diseases, feverish diseases, as it checks the thirst, relieves febrile heat, and when taken freely, gently relaxes the bowels. The juice formed into a syrup and added to water answers the same purpose and forms a pleasant adjunct to gargles in quinsy. If quinsy is, I think, swollen glands again, if I'm not mistaken. If the berries are eaten to excess, they are apt to induce diarrhea. The bark of the tree is reputed to be purgative and vermifuge, having expelled tapeworms. The tapeworm is what the English call the broadworm. So, that can be very serious. Tapeworms can be very serious, so it's good to know that. Plants for future list mulberry says the root bark is anthelmintic, that means getting rid of worms again, and cathartic, and that's like purgative, that means it's like going to expel those worms violently. A tea made from the roots has been used in the treatment of weakness, difficult urination, dysentery, tapeworms, and as a panacea, a general cure-all. Whatever. Sap, I'm not going to say it's going to help against aconite and venomous snakes. The sap is used in the treatment of ringworm. Another report says that the milky juice obtained from the axis of the leaf is used. The fruits are used to reduce fever. So the leaf sap, which is milky, sort of a latex, applied to a ringworm is what they're saying would help. The fruits are used to reduce fevers. Peterson Field Guide to Eastern Medicinal Plants says of red mulberry, American Indians drank root tea for weakness, difficult urination, dysentery, tapeworms as a panacea again. Externally, the sap was used for ringworms. Nutritious fruits used for lowering fever. Warning, large doses can cause vomiting. Now, the white mulberry, which is actually more common in my area, is considered a weed, actually. It's quite good. I like it. These came over from China, and leaf tea has been used for headaches, hyperemia, which is congestion of the blood, thirst, coughs, as a liver cleanser. Experimentally, leaf extracts are antibacterial. That's why it would help with the ringworm. Young twig tea used for edema, fruits eaten for blood deficiency to improve vision and circulation for diabetes. Inner bark tea used for lung ailments, asthma, coughs, and edema. And finally, Botany in a Day states, medicinally, a tea of the bark is used as a laxative and to expel tapeworms. The milky juice and unripe fruit may cause hallucinations, nervousness, and upset stomachs. That is the only warning I have found about this plant. Thomas Elpel knows his stuff. I have never experienced any hallucinations from mulberry, obviously. I have not, however, eaten the unripe fruit. You remember the unripe fruit was dried and ground and used medicinally, probably took away whatever that was, and the milky juice, the sap we were talking about that helps with ringworm, I have, of course, never ingested that internally. So I definitely will not be doing that, and I suggest you don't do that either, because you don't want to have hallucinations, nervousness, and an upset stomach, especially all at once. That could be quite unpleasant, I would think. So anyway, y'all have a great week. Get out there and enjoy this wonderful spring weather. Do some foraging. Definitely get some chickweed seeds. Stellaria Medea. I think just about every seed company probably sells chickweed. Uh, if not, definitely go, check it, Strictly Medicinal Herbs or your favorite medicinal herb seller. But I think any seed catalog pretty much has chickweed, so you don't have to pay a lot for the seeds. And get some going and let it reseed, and you'll have it every year. And like I said, you'll start spotting that stuff everywhere. So anyway, y'all, have a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Remember, Judson@judsoncarroll.com is the new email address. See ya.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.